Alright guys, let's be serious. Obviously, I made a bit of a mistake today. I rushed through getting all this set up, or the whole entire save state set up, and I evidently did not do a good enough job checking it. It ran just fine for me a couple times. I did not do any comprehensive bug testing, making sure that the system was completely stable, and that means that earlier today, if you're watching this live, or the previous episode if you're watching this sometime in the future, I ended up with a completely dud demo when we went to play it. So this episode is making up for it. I did, for the record, do a whole nother commit to the GitHub so that it is stable now on the GitHub. It took a full 2 hours. That is actually exactly 2 hours as it turns out. That's just kind of a lucky number, but it is in fact, whoops, wrong one. We're not going to VS Code right now. It is in fact up and stable now, and we can run through the demo. So I apologize for doing a completely crap job earlier, but it now works and we can now play the demo. So we're going to start out. I'm going to save state right now, and then we'll quit, load game, open up that file as we got, and everything is exactly as we left it. I'm keeping for the record, I'm keeping the dev tools up over here so that you can see that no errors are popping up. Hopefully no errors are popping up. There is exactly one section where errors will pop up. Admittedly, I can actually avoid that during this demo, but I do not really see a way around it, and it does not actually cause the whole entire game to crash. So I'm actually thinking about just leaving it in there because it's an error on, well, specifically what it is, it's an error on the message log when we delay our message sending, for example, right now. So if I go ahead and quit right now, in just a minute we should be seeing, oh, actually, yeah, no, I just replaced batteries, that's right. So, interesting. All right, ready? We're gonna replace batteries. And in just a moment, it should give me, yeah, that dark shell. So that was bugging out on me when I quit immediately earlier. Obviously, did not do it right now, but I'm going to go ahead and hit save state, or just save file rather, and we'll load it back up just that we can confirm at each step that this is working. So we have 2 and 10 batteries. We got some power level here, and we have this scavenge scrap thing up. So everything is exactly as we left it, and you'll notice that this loaded in as disabled. So we're going to go ahead and repair that. This is right here. We'll go ahead and get a little orange, and then we'll save state to just prove that's working, and quit. Load back up, and then check for the orange. It is orange, so that's functioning as we expect it to. And here we go. Step number 2. Got the shop. Again, I'm going to let this go. Let's go a little bit more red just for the sake of the argument. All right, so that's nearly done. So I'm going to hit save and quit, and we load back up in here. We got the trade shop still. We convert to sectors, and that's obviously right about done. So everything, as you can see, is working. Hit that. And one of the things, just save. And yeah, I'm being comprehensive here just because I feel really bad about being not being comprehensive earlier. So just want to prove that everything is functioning as we expect. Go ahead and repair that, or actually, sorry, gotta grab batteries first, and then we can repair that. I'm gonna expand this out. So this is fully expanded. That is operational now, and I'm gonna go ahead and quit. Load back in. Fully expanded, operational, and we still have 1 battery 12 scrap. I'm gonna go ahead and just, while we're here, waiting for the residents to pop up because that's the next step in our journey here. All right, there we go. So we have 3 population growing food. Hit the save button, hit the quit button, load it on up, and 3 residents getting food. We have 3 provisions right now. That just swapped over to sector. I'm just going to exchange out some more batteries just to get this pumped all the way up for the heck of it while we're here. And the last step here is going to be to get the job. that is the last thing we're at. Right now, the event cycle is active. If you recall, for the gameplay loop, or the gameplay sequence rather, the event cycle is active, and we can tell that because we just got this random event, quote unquote random event. And as you can see, we have charged batteries pop up here. We're still at 9 residents and 9 here. Previously, this was getting desynced right here. I'll talk about that in a minute when we go talk about the code, but that is also fixed. And you'll also notice that the charged batteries, all of these are gray. That was another bug that I was actually going to ignore for the time being, but while I was bug fixing, went ahead and fixed that. And as you can see, we can adjust the number of people doing stuff. Hit the save button, quit on out, load in, and there we go, 5 and 4, exactly as we have, and the arrows are properly configured. So actually, last thing I can do, let's go ahead and make sure that the shop is persistent, because remember, well, not actually the shop. The shop was not the problem, the player was the problem. Unfortunately, I cannot show you that I fixed the player because we do not have the map up yet. You can only do that when you have the map unlocked. So for the time being, you're going to have to trust me that that was fixed, or not trust me, and then we'll find out whether or not I actually fixed it correctly, because I can't tell either. But we got repair bots, we got battle axe, and we have the lugger and basic armor right now. Actually, let's change this to barge, just for the sake of the argument. Save and quit. Load on up. And barge, basic armor, repair bots, and battle axe. And actually, that probably was on scrap since we hadn't touched it for a while. So that is the entirety of the demo, or not the demo, of the gameplay so far. Bug free as best as I can tell. Everything appears to be absolutely correct. Let's see. Is this correct? That's 5 times 2 is correct, and then that's 10 times 4, I guess? Yeah, I guess that's what I have it set right now. So I am very happy that I'm able to show you guys that now, because frankly, that was really freaking depressing this morning when that did not work. So what I'm gonna do now, and I was thinking about skipping the code review today for this session, because it's one of those things, the code review, I don't know. I guess what I was thinking was basically that I took up a bunch of time this morning, and it was not a good product, so I didn't really want to take up extra time. But you know, this whole entire series is about code review, so may as well hop in here. So here we go. The one major change I did is, as you can see, gameplay got moved over to its own file, and the reason I did this is because really, and I said this back when we added the gameplay sequence to begin with, this should be replaceable. You should be able to replace this gameplay sequence with your own custom gameplay sequence. That was an idea between how we set this behind how we set this up. So I went ahead and implemented that while I was bug fixing. So all the way up in here in the new game constructor, we can pass in a gameplay sequence, which defaults to gameplay sequence. That would be this file right here. If you wanted to pass in another one, you'd have to modify something over here, or, well, I mean, really you would just replace this page right here with your own page. That would load it from somewhere else. As you can see right here, it gets loaded right here, window.game equals new game with gameplay sequence. So that is the first major change, is all this getting moved over. Second change is the shop got moved out of the event, the flags right here, because that really should be on the colony. I'm not entirely sure why I put that over here on gameplay sequence to begin with, but we modified that so that now works. That now is where it belongs. Over here in colony, actually, you know what? Let me go to utils. And I'm doing this without the GitHub at the moment, just because a lot of this is fresh in my mind. A very important change up here in, well, instead of scrolling, let me do this. Wrong button. Where is trigger event? All right, very important change over here in trigger event. We replaced just iterating over this listener's event type to copying the array. And the reason I did that, as you can see here, is because, for example, on first meeple over here in gameplay, let's just hop to it for the sake of the argument. First meeple, you can see that right here it removes listener. And the problem is that if we're iterating over listeners and it removes itself, then we never actually get to the last listener. And that was what was causing my desync in meeple. So over here in the GUI, colony, there it is, colony GUI, and in update meeple, this was actually never getting called on the very first meeple because the first meeple function over in gameplay was removing itself, which means that over in utils was iterating on this dot listener's event type, and it got to the end of this dot listener's event type because it was only length 2 now instead of length 3. So it got to the end and did not call the final listener, which was the GUI update. So that was another bug we solved, which was causing a problem. Now that was not obviously a serious problem in this morning's debacle. The first thing that was a serious problem in this morning's debacle was actually over here in first scrap, or not first scrap, in first power. When we tried to add the sector, I had this as just sectors, and check unlocks treats this as an array, which means that sectors got broken to sectors, and it removed all those things. So basically what happened is it was screwing up on that. I mean, there's not really much else to say. It was just screwing up on that. That was a bug. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to see that in the changelog, and I got to do that recite that from memory because, again, gameplay.js was added this time, and therefore GitHub considers the whole entire file all new code. Otherwise, moving onwards and upwards. Evidently, and I don't recall this being the case. Let me just check really quick. Oh, I see what it is. So, likewise, and this was contributing, I believe, to the problem, is over here in... It is in colonies GUI. So, up in setup UI is where it's at. And down here. Previously, this was just this amount of code, just this dot setup sectors. We were not actually adding the sectors after they were added. So that was a problem. And then furthermore, we added this unlock shop here, which again checks for shop in there and sets up shop. And that was added because we moved shop over to our flags, which is actually, I'm in the wrong file. That's why I can't find it. Over here. So over here in unlocks, shop is now an unlock. So that is why we added in that. And as you can see right here, we got the temp listeners just like we have on Game GUI. Or actually not Game GUI, on Gameplay rather. And we have that registered right here so it can remove itself after we confirm that shop is unlocked. So for example, down here in setup UI, if the shop is already unlocked, we call this, call setup shop, and then this is not setup shop. There we go. And then we remove it. So even if it's not called because of a callback, because of a listener, which would be this guy right here, unlock shop, just by calling setup shop, we automatically remove it ahead of time. So that was another bug fix. The arrows, I'm not going to bore you with. That was just making sure that the arrows were getting updated in the correct place. So the arrows were not getting updated when you just added a job, which is obviously a problem because if you don't update them after you add the job, then they're not going to be up to date until you modify the number of meeple on the job. That is when they were getting updated. Just checking. Okay, down here, this was a bug I noticed and didn't really think anything of, but colony, this one. And down in, what is this in again? Let's see, this is line 942, 942. Not line 42. 942? Oh, okay, here it is. Yes. Previously, we're adding the disabled all the way down bottom. The problem is that in certain situations, this would actually, this specific, actually, I'm sorry, this right here, this change callback would end up, if I recall correctly, triggering before this, which was a problem. So we need to make sure that we disabled it before we checked sector.isReady and sector.timer is frozen. I take that back. It's actually this one here. Sorry. Being a little scatterbrained now. So progress. We had progress because we were loading from file, and progress was therefore -1 because comparing our -1 for the ready flag. You'll recall that our offset time with the ready flag is -1. So therefore, because -1 was a value and it was returning this minus remaining again ending up as a number because it was set to -1. We are getting into progress when we're loading from file instead of sector 0. So you recall when we were doing the demo just a minute ago, I saved before we opened up the scrap, right? Before we powered on scrap sector, I saved the game and then reloaded to prove that it was still disabled. So that's what that does. Running through the GitHub. So over at IO, again, this is pretty simple stuff, but we'll touch on it really quick. So let's see, what's the first one in the list? Okay, actually, the first thing in the list is, you'll recall way back in the day, items was actually named equipment, and therefore this was equip. Well, this was actually still equip, and I've decided to finally change it. Very simple change. So this just got changed from equip to items to be in line with the rest of the module, or with the rest of our files. So that's a very simple change. And then down in the save save file. So as I stated before, some of this stuff had to change. Let's see, this is 217. So player items, player resources, I told you that those would have to change because I forgot that player resources was actually an object, not an array. So that got fixed. Weapons I don't think got fixed because nothing was wrong with it. Correct. Up here, player armor. Player armor, we had to make sure that this was... So the funny thing is I think I changed this just to be in line with load armor. Basically down here in load, this was just save data.player.equipment.armor. Let me make sure I'm feeding that correctly. Oh no, actually, I'm not. We were just previously adding in equipment. So again, player was all source of foobarred. So we were just passing in player. In the middle of debugging everything and fixing everything, I had this as this. So you never actually saw this as this line right here. Because, again, this was the middle of this commit. But as it turns out, this is a problem, leaving it like this. Because armor here, when you pull it out of the save data, is the ID if it is set. And therefore, if it's ID 0, this ends up as false. So this is the correct way to parse armor and transport. Again, up here in save, I don't think that this actually matters that I check for null, but it doesn't hurt anything as far as I can figure. Because, yeah, this shouldn't hurt anything. So we're good here. Doesn't necessarily matter that we made this change. And moving on. We talked about all this stuff, and anything else in save. I don't think there's anything else left in save that I changed. It doesn't look like it. So Down to load. We already talked about the player equipment. Well, we started talking about this. So we talked about this already. And then for resources, resources have to be created into an object. We did not do this before because with the colony, you don't have to. The colony is just numbers because it doesn't care about weights or quantities or anything like that. Like it doesn't take quantity into account for storage purposes, is what I mean to say. And therefore they are just flat list of indexes. But for the player, we do care about weight and quantities. So therefore we need to parse these out into instances. Now the interesting thing here is that maybe I just talked about this, but I had it in my head that we were using weapon types on the player. Now the funny thing is that I actually couldn't find that anywhere in the code, so evidently that's just in my head. But that is something that I may have mentioned that I was considering doing. And then when we create the combat character over here in characters, get combat character, then we would modify or initialize, I should say. Where is weapons? When we initialize this weapons, we would turn each weapon into a weapon instance. That's something that I had in my head. And if we go over to items, items, and pop down to weapons, you can see that we have this new here. So what I was figuring was that we would initialize a new weapon on each combat. I don't see that in character or items, so evidently I didn't do that, as I said. But that is something to keep into mind. We may come back and change this to just be weapon types, because again, I can't think of a good reason why. Let me just double check weapon type really quick before I say something silly. Weapon type, shop item. It has a weight, right? Yeah, it has a weight. So since it has a weight, shop item. I'm just double checking my math here. Okay, no, that's only shop item. That's not actually item. Well, it has weight. So yeah, we don't actually need the weapon class until we get into combat, is my thinking. So all this extra stuff is combat only. So we may in the future change this to be weapon type instead, in which case we would just delete this and we'd be kosher. But for the time being, that's where we're at. We're going to keep it like that instead of breaking stuff. Down here in sector, I had forgot to do this. We had if ready, set ready, but I had forgotten to freeze the timer as well. We should freeze the timer if it is ready. Gameplay sequence, as mentioned, was added. So down here, when we create the new game, we add the gameplay sequence. This right here, this is the gameplay sequence. Yeah, sorry, I got myself a little lost there just because of how it's written. But gameplay sequence is created here and then put right there. And again, that's off of gameplay sequence class now, so that we can do it dynamically. And that is everything in IO. Anything else in Colony that I'm forgetting? I don't think so. That's Colony GUI. We definitely don't have anything left in Colony GUI, right? Yeah. Okay, so this was weird. Over in Colony, I have no idea why. And oh, I actually, you know what? I think I know why at this point. I just saw it and it didn't make sense to me. But over here in Colony, we had undefined right here, and I think I just figured it out. It's one of those things. I was trying to get this up and running. I say that, and it makes it sound like I was rushing again. I took my time with the debugging, all right? I took my time with the debugging. I did this, I noticed this after I was done. So that's why I really quick slapped it on there and changed it. But start time, okay, no. Yeah, so before that was undefined. And I was thinking that that was going to be a problem, and it looks like it is. I just don't know why it was working before at this point. So before, I know for a fact that the timer on colony was working with it set as undefined. The other colony. There we go. This colony. This set as undefined right here evidently was working because I recall the power level changing on the colony. I just don't know why at this point. I set it to now because that makes sense. And down here we had an error that we never actually ran into before. In, I think it's sector 405 is the line number. Okay, let's go to 405. 405, whoops. 405. So, because we had never added a sector from a save file before, we never actually ran into this error. This used to be lowercase f, which is incorrect, is capital F. So that was another bug. And over in player, again, never loading from a save file. This was an object, right? But this was array from. We had this as a... this is resources, right? Where are we in right now? Oh, we're in combat character. Wrong character. 1 second. There we go. So this was array from instead of object.assign. So that got fixed. Actually, it looks like combat character also was a bracket before instead of an object. And that's it. Alright, awesome. So that was all our errors for today. Now, I'll tell you what, it felt like a little bit of a weird thing to readme, there we go, to only commit a 2-hour session. And I was like, man, that kind of stinks, but at the same time, I really want to commit it because we have a broken file right now, and the goal was not to have broken gameplay once we put the GitHub up. So I figured it was necessary, but after a moment I realized, wait a second, I did like, you know, close to 20 sessions that were 2 hours long before. So actually this is in line with all our sessions for the first half, this 2-hour session. So it's not that big of a deal. It was just kind of funny because ever since the halfway point, or I say the halfway point, but we're way past, you know, the 20 hours at this point, I assume, or 40 hours at this point, I assume. So ever since then, we've been slowly, well, I guess intermittently looking at it again now. I guess it's been a bit intermittent. I know the past several sessions have been super long. So it just felt funny going back to a 2-hour session, but I guess that's technically okay. And not okay that it had to happen because, again, that should have all been fixed before I went live this morning, but again, I apologize for that one. Trust me, I am just as disappointed as you are, or maybe more disappointed. Maybe you don't particularly care. Regardless, at this point, that is everything from me. One of these things, a nice 30-minute session this time. It's been a while since we've done a 30-minute session. They've been, you know, 1.5 to 2 hours recently. So enjoy the nice, short and sweet video. And yeah, I don't have any reason to be rambling on here. The next thing to do is get us to the map. So that will be the next committed session. The next committed session will be getting us to the overworld map. And once we are there, then we honestly, have to figure out what exactly we're doing with the map, because as previously stated, we kind of skirted around the map generation issue because we weren't sure whether or not we were going to actually do that. And B, we haven't actually implemented any random events for the overworld or for the colony aside from this one. And this is a pseudo-random event, is what we have in right now. So one of those things, get to the world map is the goal for next session. And then after that would be implement all the random generation rather. And then once we have all the random generation in, then it's a matter of core content. And that would be what would be your equivalent in a dark room of the mines. So you had the coal mine, the sulfur mine, etc., 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 and those unlocked jobs for your meeples. Similarly, we are going to have those consistent landmarks on the map that you can expect to unlock. However, as I've said before, I want this to be more roguelike. So, for that reason, most of the unlocks in the game that are not directly on the main storyline, and I say on the main storyline, but let's face it, a dark room does not have a terribly clear storyline, a terribly well-defined storyline, but everything on the main path will be predefined, and at the same time, those will be in the minority of things you'll be able to unlock. So, all that out of the way, I am very happy to actually have a working game again. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you have a great and wonderful day, afternoon, or evening, wherever you're at in the world. And I will catch you next time.